The coming live-action Star Wars TV show, The Mandalorian, is a big freaking deal. It's going to be a Game of Thrones kind of show, which allows deep expanding of the Star Wars mythos and the timeline. We'll be able to explore the lore, hang out for multiple hours in the Star Wars universe. In this video, I want to ask the question that any self-respecting Star Wars fan has on their mind when it comes to this show, and that is, where's the Jedi at? Seriously, we're going to talk about what Jedi might be in the show. Here we go. What's up, everybody? My name is Josh. This is the Den of Nerds. Now, before we get into all this Force-using Jedi craziness, I need to shout out Wakanda Forever. We got the nerd card question correct in my news video from Thursday. You definitely know your stuff when it comes to Marvel Comics, so shout out to you, Wakanda Forever. And we'll, of course, do another nerd card question at the end of this video. All right, so let's get into this. Now, for most Star Wars fans, the Jedi or the Force or the Sith are really important to the fabric of Star Wars. And for me personally, even when a story focuses on a non-Force sensitive character, I still absolutely love it when they maybe stumble into a Jedi temple or we meet some Force users or people that believe in the Force. I mean, one of my favorite parts of Rogue One is the Guardians of the Whills on Jedha. I absolutely love the Chirrut Enway character, and honestly, it might be one of my favorite Force-using things in all of Star Wars. So naturally, I wanted to talk about like what kind of Force stuff, what kind of Force users we might see in The Mandalorian. And that's what we're doing right now. So let's start with talking about the timeline for the show. I think this will set a lot of things in motion, get you to maybe understand what potential Jedi and Force users we will encounter. Now, The Mandalorian is set sometime after the Battle of Endor. Okay, this is obviously when Luke Skywalker turns Darth Vader back to the light side. He kills the Emperor, you know, we have our celebration, but that is pretty much it. So that is what we know about what is going on in the show. The Imperial Remnant still takes place, but the show itself takes place far away from the New Republic, which is asserted back control of the galaxy after the Empire being defeated. So just to bring some things into perspective, around that time, there were several Force users that are essentially off the table for the show. This would obviously be Darth Vader, the Emperor, and then Ezra Bridger. Now, Ezra Bridger, before the Battle of Endor, flies off into hyperspace with the Purrgil and Grand Admiral Thrawn, and we have no idea where he is at. But we do know that he is gone for at least the duration of the Battle of Endor and after that. And we know this because of the epilogue at the end of Star Wars Rebels. Ezra hasn't been seen, Ahsoka shows up, and Sabine and them are going to look for him. Now, we will get into all of that in just a second, but let's run through some of the other Force users that might be around in this time period in the canon. There would, of course, be Luke Skywalker. He's probably the most powerful Force user out there. Definitely the only Jedi that we know of. There is Ahsoka Tano, who I just mentioned. There is Leia Organa. And then there is Snoke. Now, that's along with Ezra and the Emperor and Vader. But like we said, Vader, Emperor, Ezra, off the table. Not going to show up in this show, at least not right away when it comes to Ezra. Now I want to shift gears and talk about the possibility of other types of Force users being around in this time period. And to be honest with you guys, it is completely possible, as far as from what I know in the canon, that there would be other Force sensitives around the galaxy at this time. A couple of different things point to this. I mean, number one, Luke Skywalker takes students to formulate his new Jedi Order along with Ben Solo. This would imply that Luke knew that there were Force sensitive people out there. He may have even encountered a few of them, you know, kept tabs on them, so to speak. Lor San Tekka and the Church of the Force was this organization that was built up around that time. They worship the Force. They hold the Jedi in very high esteem. We know that Lor San Tekka was hanging out with Luke Skywalker for a time period, and so he might know some Force-sensitive people, perhaps bringing them together to worship at the Church of the Force. And so essentially, I say all of that to tell you that, yeah, there could definitely be just other random Force users sprinkled throughout the galaxy, and it is possible that we will see some of them in The Mandalorian. One of the things that was really interesting to me as I was researching for this video was the fact that a lot of people think that Luke Skywalker's Jedi Temple was created on Tatooine. And of course, there's a lot of different Force havings to do's with Tatooine. You have Anakin Skywalker seemingly created on that planet. Luke Skywalker grows up there. Obi-Wan Kenobi spends a long time there. We know Darth Maul eventually comes there. Tatooine's got a lot going on when it comes to the Force. And if Luke did indeed have his temple on on Tatooine, that could mean that there's a lot of Force virgins or Force energy on that planet, perhaps being a call of sorts to other Force sensitive. We do believe that there will be scenes on Tatooine with this Mandalorian character, as this person is a freed slave from Jabba's palace, which of course all had to do with Luke Skywalker showing up and doing his Force thing. So maybe we see some Force sensitives there, perhaps even the Mandalorian themselves is Force sensitive, although I kind of highly doubt it. I feel like the Mandalorian is just going to be a gunslinger, and we will interact with the Force through other characters or through like the periphery of the story. Now, if the show ends up going to Mandalore, which we think it will, there will be a lot of Force knowledge and information about the Force on Mandalore. It would stand to reason that several people on Mandalore will be around when Bo-Katan was hanging out with Sabine Wren in Star Wars Rebels. Ezra Bridger was there on the planet helping interact. There was, of course, Darth Maul, who subjugated the planet. He was eventually beaten and kicked off of Mandalore by Ahsoka Tano. So the Mandalorians have had their fair share of interactions with Force sensitives in the time period of the original trilogy and before that. And it goes way deeper than even that, because there were ancient wars between the Mandalorians and the Jedi. These were in legend. This all circled around the Revan story, the very popular legend story about the Jedi Revan. You probably heard about this story before. Maybe you played the Knights of the Old Republic games, all about Revan, Mandalorians, Jedi, things like that. Well, all of that stuff was brought from Legends into the main canon in Star Wars Rebels by Kanan Jarrus just talking about those wars. And so we don't know exactly what happened between Mandalore and the Jedi, but they did war, and the Jedis did win that war. Obviously, if we explore more of the lore of Mandalore, damn, I just said lore a lot. But if we do explore some of that, then it stands to reason we'll learn more about the Jedi-Mandalorian wars. And of course, Tar Vizsla, this Jedi that was Mandalorian, created the Darksaber, a unique, one-of-a-kind lightsaber, which plays a very important role on Mandalore. Sabine Wren had this in Star Wars Rebels, gifts it to Bo-Katan, who she believed would be the rightful ruler of Mandalore. And we know that Sabine is on Mandalore until Ahsoka shows up to take her away, and they all go look for Ezra. So it's very possible and probable that a lot of that stuff would be mentioned in the show, that we'd hear a lot about this kind of stuff when it comes to the Jedi, when it comes to the Force. Once again, peripheral stuff, maybe not main characters, but very, very cool just to have that sort of stuff filled out. And also, if there was a Mandalorian Jedi, it is possible that we would eventually interact with new Mandalorians that do show Force sensitivity. So, hey, maybe we get some of that flavor on the Mandalorian planet as well. Now, I just mentioned Ezra, Sabine, and Ahsoka. This all has to do with the epilogue of Star Wars Rebels. If you haven't watched Star Wars Rebels, highly, highly recommend checking that out. But the big question for a lot of Star Wars fans that did like Rebels is, will we see Sabine, will we see Ahsoka, and will we see Ezra on the Mandalorian show? I actually believe there's a pretty good chance that we will, and fans are going to go absolutely crazy. If you didn't know this, Dave Filoni is indeed directing the very first episode, the pilot episode of The Mandalorian. Now, what's interesting is Dave Filoni, of course, created the Ahsoka character, as well as created the Ezra character and the Sabine character, and especially when it comes to Ahsoka, because she is such a popular character. Dave often gets asked in interviews, will we ever see a live-action version of Ahsoka? Will we ever see Ahsoka in any of the movies or anything like that? Dave's answer has always been that if there was anything to be live-action Ahsoka, he would have to be directly involved. Nobody at Lucasfilm would ever do something with Ahsoka without talking to Dave first. And the fact that he's doing this first episode, it's based on Mandalorian, and considering the epilogue we got in Rebels, I think there's a pretty good chance that we will actually see Sabine and Ahsoka, and perhaps at a later date, Ezra Bridger. Now, ultimately, the way that I think this would be handled would be to have Ahsoka show up and leave with Sabine on their mission to go find Ezra, and this would be sort of a big deal for the Mandalorians. I mean, they'd respect Ahsoka for coming and back in the day, getting rid of Darth Maul. You know, obviously they have a higher level of respect for Sabine. And I think this could be a very interesting thing that happens in the show, where Mandalore's like, oh snap, we just lost this very prolific Mandalorian, Sabine Wren. Now Bo-Katan is just trying to figure out how to rule Mandalore, and the Mandalorians are trying to figure out what to do with the new state of the galaxy. I think that would be very interesting. I think it would get fans very, very hype. But the focus of the show has to remain on the Mandalorian. That's what the show's called. That's what it has to be about. But it doesn't mean we can't get a little bit of that flavor from Rebels to set up some plots later on the planet of Mandalore. Next, let's talk about Luke Skywalker. What's the possibility and potential that we'll see young Luke wielding that green lightsaber? I know a lot of fans would be hyped for that, and I actually think this is something we could eventually see as well. At this time in the canon, Luke Skywalker is off doing Indiana Jones type stuff, rescuing Jedi relics, trying to figure out deeper meanings and mysteries of the Force, and at one point he's actually hanging out with Lord Santeca. They're going around trying to find different artifacts and things like this. We see this in the Shattered Empire novel where he's rescuing the Force trees with Poe Dameron's mother. We see this in Battlefront 2 on a mission on Paleo where Luke gets the compass, which eventually leads him to Ahch-To. And so it's very possible. I would love this, but once again, we cannot take the focus off of the Mandalorian. I think this would be a one-off episode. Perhaps a mission that the Mandalorian is on intersects with a mission that Luke Skywalker is on, much like what happened in Battlefront 2 on Paleo. That would be very, very cool. Here's to hoping that Sebastian Stan, of course, would play a young Luke Skywalker. Think that would be very hype. So I do think it's possible we see Luke Skywalker in the show, but I would say probably down the line. Now, another Force-sensitive character that's out there in this time period would, of course, be Leia Organa. But I really don't think we're going to see much of Leia in the show at all. I do think she might be mentioned. The New Republic would be mentioned, of course. But this is the thing here. It specifically says in the description for The Mandalorian that this show takes place far away from the New Republic. It's supposed to be lawless, right? Really represent that Western or feudal Japan samurai type vibe that we get in some of our Star Wars. And so Leia Organa, she's going to be in the core worlds, man. She's going to be doing her thing. Now, on a side note, when it comes to Force training, Luke Skywalker did train Leia in some ways of the Force. This is mentioned in the Jason Fry Last Jedi novelization, so I'd love to see some of that flavor in the show, but I just don't think it necessarily fits. So we might see some Leia, but probably not. Now, the last Force sensitive that's out there at this time period that's technically on the table to show up in the show would be Supreme Leader Snoke. At the time, he would probably just be known as Snoke. But we need more information about the time period itself before we can make a definitive statement on whether Snoke would be in this or not. Because it really appears like the show's going to tackle this fragmented version of the Imperial Remnant, which is ultimately defeated at the Battle of Jakku. Now, after the Battle of Jakku, this ragtag group of Imperials that's loyal to the Emperor's vision, called the Contingency, goes into the unknown regions. Those people end up becoming the First Order. They meet Snoke out there. These weird purple-robed aliens help them navigate places, and Snoke usurps the throne from everybody and takes over. It's real, real crazy. So if the show takes place before the Battle of Jakku, Snoke is technically around, but I don't know how many people would be aware of him, and I definitely don't think he'd be having a huge influence on the happenings of our galaxy. So, maybe we get some Snoke action, maybe we get some First Order stuff, but I feel like that would be seasons down the line. Perhaps they will even cover the Battle of Jakku in the show. Would be really, really cool, and then we can see what's happening at that time period. So, really hoping that's the case, but it would have to wait. So overall, I believe the Force and the Jedi and just in general Force users will be in The Mandalorian, probably sprinkled throughout in the peripheral. I think there's a good chance we get Ahsoka and Sabine in the first episode, but they sort of leave and we don't see them again for a long time, and maybe get some Ezra stuff later on. But that's kind of my thoughts, guys, on the potential Force users we could see in the show, how it might work. It all has to do with the time period in the show. I am personally so hyped for The Mandalorian. I want to know what all of you guys are thinking. And what do you think about this list of Force users that could possibly pop up? Is there anything else that jumps out to you? Maybe some people I missed or something? Let me know in the comment section below. All right, let's check that nerd card before we get out of here. I want to know, what is the name of the child that Hera Syndulla and Kanan Jarrus end up having at the end of Star Wars Rebels? This kid would be Force sensitive as well. Probably a hell of a pilot. Would love to see some more stories with this character. But the question remains, what was the name of Hera and Kanan's child? Answer that question in the comment section below. That's going to do it for this video. Thank you so much for checking this out. If you're watching this on Star Wars Sunday, happy Star Wars Sunday. If you're not watching this on Sunday, come back on Sundays, guys. That's when we do all of our Star Wars stuff over here. It's a good time. As I always say, I hope you are having an awesome and nerdy day, and I will see you in the next video, which will be probably Monday. So I'll see you then.